Listen, there's a notification button. Hit it. It's in the shape of a bell. It'll keep you up to date with everything BluMaan, all right? Smack that notification button, thanks. Have you ever wondered how celebrities just seem to look good forever? Or even in some circumstances, they look good as they get older compared to when they were younger? There's of course different variables at play, but I'm willing to bet that you'd be shocked as to how many male celebrities have had hair treatments done, especially hair transplants. It's no surprise that a full head of hair is closely associated to looking more youthful. And for some, they're willing to undergo a surgical hand to create a fuller head of hair. If it ever reached that stage for me, I'd probably get it done. I'm very aware of the process now after working with Bosley. I know how hair transplant systems work now because I was in the surgical room making a video. And if you want any more information on how hair transplants work, definitely check out that video. It's really interesting. You might learn a thing or two. Now, there's tons of male celebrities that have undergone this process, but today we're focusing on 5, starting with Joe Rogan.
I had a hair transplant. That was the dumbest thing I've ever done.
Yeah. That one didn't really work. As for success stories though, let's start with Machine Gun Kelly. MGK of course has been pretty hot in the news lately with the back and forth diss tracks between himself and Eminem.
How you gonna name yourself after a damn gun and have a man bun?
And speaking of man buns, let's take a little look at MGK's hair history. So MGK is 28 years old right now, and he underwent pretty severe hair loss at a young age. Even looking back as early as 2009, he would have been around 19 years old. You can see that his hairline is pulled back pretty far on the sides. You can see the same a couple years later in 2011, and I said that he experienced hair loss, but I'm guessing that this actually doesn't have as much to do with hair loss as it does with just being a natural hairline. That said, besides the hairline, his hair for most of his younger life has been on the thinner side, and he just generally hasn't had much of it. But fast forward to today, he's got a full head of hair. His hairline has been fully restored. It's not pushed back as far anymore, and his actual hair is much thicker as well. In terms of the hair transplant method used, you can see a scar on the back of MGK's head, which is consistent with follicular unit hair transplant system, which is also known as FUT. And this basically means removing a strip of tissue which includes hair follicles from the back of your head. So it's like a full strip, skin and everything, and then taking out the follicles from that strip that you removed from the back and replanting it where it needs to go in the front. There's a couple different ways a hair transplant can be done, and this method is usually used if the client needs a lot of work to be done because they remove quite a significant amount from the back. Next up, Lebron James, obviously a very famous basketball player, but also more on topic, he's done a couple barbershop series where he pretty much just chats with guys in a barbershop. But LeBron didn't always have a perfect hairline, and let me tell you, it is drop dead perfect now. An interview he did in 2014 shows clear signs of a receding hairline, and if you'll notice, around the same time, he sported a headband in most of the games he played, making it kind of hard to see what's going on up there. Compare that to today's games, I'm not seeing the headband nearly as much. Coincidence? I'm not so sure. Taking a look at the back of LeBron's head, it's safe to assume that he also underwent an FUT treatment because of the noticeable scarring left at the time the transplant would have taken place. Next up is one of my favorite transformations, and that is Mr. Elon Musk. I think Elon is a great example of someone who kind of went from geeky and nerdy looking to someone who's considered quite cool nowadays. Elon Musk was one of the founders of PayPal, and if you check him out during his PayPal days, he looks quite a bit different.
There are 62 McLarens in the world, and I will own one of them.
Now, when I was doing my research, I couldn't find any definite proof of the type of hair transplant that Elon had. But when he was thinning out on top, he still had a lot of thick hair on the sides and back, and because he still had a lot of hair around these regions, which is where you take the donor hairs from, I'm gonna assume that he went for an FUE treatment as opposed to the FUT treatment that MGK and LeBron had. The main difference is the FUT, like I mentioned, they pull a full strip out the back of your head, including tissue and hair. Tissue is just like a nicer way of saying skin, so they take a full chunk like that. FUE, on the other hand, kind of just takes hair follicles directly without any skin, kind of in a random manner from the back of your head to be transplanted onto the front. It's less evasive than the FUT version because it doesn't leave any scarring on the back of your head, and it works for guys out there who are experiencing hair loss on the front, but they still have a lot of hair to, remove from the back without having to take a full strip. The FUE procedure is the one I documented when I was in LA. Again, if you want to check it out, we've got it up here. And considering the amount of hair that Elon now has, it's safe to assume that he had this treatment done multiple times. It's quite common for people to get this treatment done in stages, so more than once, in order to achieve a fuller head of hair. And finally, our last celebrity of the day is Chris Martin, lead singer of Coldplay. He's a good example of having a transformation done very discreetly discreetly because not many people noticed or really talked about this. It's speculated that he got a hair transplant sometime around 2010, and the reason why this flew mostly under the radar is because he wasn't experiencing hair loss in a major way at the time. Or should I say, he got the treatment before his hair loss was super noticeable. For example, here's a photo from 2008 where it looks like he has, a perfectly fine amount of hair. You wouldn't really know that he'd be thinning. But if you take a look earlier in 2003, you can see him sporting a pretty severe widow's peak with the shaved look. And then compare that to his short hair as of recent, you can see those gaps have been magically filled in. And now I'll leave it to you. What do you guys think about hair transplants on the rise? More and more guys are considering them, more and more guys are getting them, especially if you can afford it. Like I said, personally, I definitely strongly consider it if I needed it at some point. And I want to know, do you kind of view it in the same light of like plastic surgery where you're adjusting something and making it unnatural, or is it a little bit different because, once you had that hair, now you don't, and now you're putting it back? Curious to hear your thoughts on that. With that said, that's everything I've got for you today. Make sure you hit that smash button before you leave this video. Subscribe if you're new. Sign up to our email list. We're giving away monthly BluMaan products for free in the email list. I'll see everybody next time.